I want you to just close your eyes for a second and picture a classic dusty American frontier town.
Oh, yeah.
You know, the exact image, right? The air is dry, there are horses hitched outside a local saloon, and right there, tacked to the weathered wood of the town's post office wall, is a piece of rough paper.
Mm.
And at the top, printed in bold, unmistakable, heavy block letters, is a single word: wanted.
It is an incredibly evocative image, honestly, and one that operates almost like a universal shorthand today. That visual is practically baked into our cultural DNA at this point.
It really is. And, well, welcome to today's deep dive, where we are taking that exact image and completely untouching how it actually works.
Right.
Our mission today is exploring a single, surprisingly deep source, which is the Wikipedia page on the wanted poster.
Yeah. And it's a great source.
It is, because what we are going to do is trace how this seemingly outdated piece of frontier memorabilia, something you've definitely seen in old Western movies or, maybe on a modern highway billboard, how it evolved into a highly sophisticated, high-tech, and even geopolitical tool for modern law enforcement and the media.
The mechanics of how that evolution happened, and specifically the timeline of it, is full of details that completely upend what we assume about how authorities communicate with the public. Yeah. It's basically a masterclass in behavioral psychology and logistics.
Yeah, there are some major paradigm shifts in here.
Oh.
Because when you strip away the cowboy aesthetic, the historical wanted poster is essentially the world's original analog form of crowdsourcing.
Oh, that's a perfect way to put it.
Right, like long before the internet, before social media, before Amber Alerts on our cell phones, this was how a central authority blasted a message out to the masses to solve a problem they simply didn't have the manpower to solve alone.
Exactly. They needed the public's eyes.
But to understand how we got from that dusty town square to modern digital manhunts, we first need to look at the physical anatomy of the poster itself. And we need to uncover a logistical detail about when the FBI actually updated their printing technology, because that completely caught me off guard.
Yeah, let's start with the physical object, because the anatomy of a classic wanted poster is remarkably consistent by design. You have a central image. Historically, that would be a photograph if law enforcement was lucky enough to have one, or, a facial composite produced by the police.
Right, a sketch.
Exactly. Below that, you have a physical description of the fugitive, a detailed description of the specific crime they are alleged to have committed, and crucially, a set monetary reward.
And historically, these were strategically placed where foot traffic was highest. We're talking post offices, district offices, public venues.
A local bulletin board, basically.
Well, yeah. And the look of it, that specific aesthetic, is heavily tied to the American frontier. The distinct wood-type typography used at the time is a huge part of why it feels so iconic to us now. But there's a practical reason for that, right? Like, they weren't just trying to make it look cool for a movie poster.
Far from it. No, wood type was purely functional necessity. I mean, in the 19th century, if you wanted to print letters large enough to be read from horseback or, say, across a dusty street.
Which you'd need to do.
Right. Metal type of that size would be incredibly heavy, it would be expensive, and just super difficult for a small town printer to manage.
Oh, I hadn't even thought of the weight of the metal.
Yeah. Carved wood blocks were cheap, they were highly durable, and a local printer could easily swap the letters in and out on the press. It was rugged technology for a rugged environment.
That makes so much sense. And a prime historical example of this early format that our source mentions is the poster printed for John Wilkes Booth after the assassination of Abraham Lincoln.
Which is actually a perfect transition point in this history. The Booth poster featured photographs of Booth and his accomplices, but because photomechanical reproduction wasn't widespread yet...
They couldn't just print the photo onto the paper.
Right. Those photos were often actual photographic prints physically pasted onto the paper broadsides, alongside a detailed description and a massive reward.
Wow.
It was a laborious process designed to catch the eye instantly. But if we track the visual evolution of these posters forward, we hit a detail that is incredibly counterintuitive.
Okay, yes, this is the part.
For over a century, the vast majority of these posters were printed strictly in black and white.
Which makes total sense for the 1800s.
Of course. But the FBI did not start routinely using color photographs in their printed posters until 2009.
Okay, I got so stuck on this detail in our notes. Yeah. 2009 for color printing.
Yep, 2009.
Wait, so let me unpack this. By then, we all had smartphones in our pockets. The first iPhone came out in 2007. We had smartphones before the FBI decided to use a color printer for their physical wanted posters. Was the Bureau just hopelessly behind the times, or is there an actual mechanical reason they held out on black and white for so long?
It wasn't about being behind the times at all. It was actually about absolute standardization across a highly fragmented system.
Okay.
If you think about the sheer volume of posters the FBI had to distribute across thousands of post offices, banks, and local police precincts nationwide, color introduces friction.
No, who's so?
Well, if the FBI issues a pristine color poster, but a local sheriff in rural Texas only has a cheap black and white copier to run off 500 duplicates for the county.
Oh, the resulting image quality degrades significantly.
Exactly. Contrast is completely lost. It turns into a gray smudge.
Ah, so it's about making sure the image survives the reproduction process at the lowest possible level of technology.
Precisely. Black and white printing was faster, it was vastly cheaper, and significantly easier to reproduce at local levels without losing the distinct facial features of the fugitive.
Which is the whole point of the poster.
Right. For decades, the priority was reach and reliability, not high resolution. They needed the face in front of as many eyes as possible, knowing those posters would be photocopied and faxed a dozen times over.
Fax machines.
Yeah.
Right, you can't fax a color photo effectively.
Exactly. It wasn't until the digital age truly forced their hand and high-quality color printing became ubiquitously cheap at literally every local precinct that they made the official switch.
That changes the perspective for me. It's not a lack of technology, it's designing for the lowest common denominator to ensure the system doesn't break.
Right.
But of course, a poster is just a piece of paper. You can print millions of them perfectly, but without a reason for the public to actually stop, read, and care. It's just wallpaper.
It's invisible.
Exactly. The real engine driving this entire system isn't the ink. It's the economics.
The bounty. The incentive structure is what makes the poster actually function in the real world.
Yeah, this is where the whole concept of the bounty comes in. These rewards were meticulously designed to incentivize citizens to do one of two things. Either provide information that leads to an arrest, or, in some historical and even modern cases, catch the criminal themselves.
And when you look at modern iterations, we aren't just talking about a few $100 anymore.
No, not at all.
The scale of modern bounties is staggering. Our source notes a $10 million reward for someone like El Chapito.
$10 million. That is life-changing money.
And with stakes that high, modern posters have evolved to provide more than just a face. They now routinely include fingerprints to aid in definitive identification.
Because if a government is handing over $10 million, they need absolute proof of identity.
Exactly. And this financial incentive was so historically powerful that it created an entirely new profession.
Bounty hunters.
Right. These are individuals who literally make a living chasing down wanted individuals to collect these rewards.
Which brings us to perhaps the most famous phrase associated with this entire topic. One I think we really need to clarify for you, the listener. The phrase, dead or alive.
Ah, yes. The classic trope.
When you hear that phrase, you probably immediately think of the Wild West. A lawless land where a local sheriff is basically giving the public a license to kill. And the phrase literally meant the reward would be paid whether you brought the person in breathing or brought in their corpse. It indicated the target was officially declared an outlaw.
We should definitely define outlaw here in its literal historical sense.
Right.
It meant the person was deemed outside the protection of the law. Therefore, it was permissible to kill them or permissible if they violently resisted arrest.
But here's where it gets really interesting to me. Because the trope we see in movies is that dead or alive was a government decree, right? Like the ultimate state-sanctioned punishment handed down by a judge or a sheriff. But our sources say the reality is entirely different. Most official issuers of wanted posters, actual law enforcement agencies, strongly preferred the target to be taken alive.
They absolutely had to. I mean, the justice system requires a living defendant to function properly.
Right, you can't put a dead person on trial.
Exactly. A dead suspect cannot be interrogated for information about accomplices. They cannot be put on trial to demonstrate the effectiveness of the law to the public. And they do not provide the necessary legal closure to the victims or the state.
Okay, so law enforcement was very rarely the entity slapping dead or alive on a poster.
Very rarely.
So if it wasn't the government who was putting those words in bold woodblock type, it was actually private organizations using extreme measures to protect their bottom line.
Right.
It's essentially corporate frontier justice.
Yeah.
We're talking about railroad companies, stagecoach lines, private banks. If you were continually robbing their trains and costing them money, They didn't care about a fair trial. They just wanted the problem eliminated, and they had the capital to pay for it.
It was a brutal private sector solution to a security problem. And if we look at the psychology of this, putting a price tag on a human being, especially a dead or alive price tag funded by a massive corporation, fundamentally shifts the behavior of the general public.
It really does.
It transforms citizens from passive observers of crime into active participants in a manhunt. You are essentially deputizing the population through capitalism.
It changes the person looking at the poster from a bystander who might, call the police, into an opportunist who might go buy a rifle.
It completely weaponizes public attention.
Right.
But as effective as that was, that paper system had a fatal flaw.
Right, the speed of travel.
Yeah.
This system of crowdsourced justice driven by financial incentives was highly localized for over a century. You had to physically walk into a post office or a train station, stop and read the poster.
Right.
But if a fugitive gets on a train, or later gets in a car, they are moving faster than the mail coach can deliver the paper posters to the next town. The target audience is stationary, but the criminal is mobile.
And that necessity for speed is exactly what forces the leap to the digital era. Law enforcement figured out how to take this exact same incentive structure and put it on absolute steroids using modern infrastructure.
This is a massive paradigm shift. In 2007, the FBI piloted a new program. They took the traditional wanted poster and started posting them on electronic billboards in 23 cities.
Right?
Instead of woodblock type, we're talking glowing LEDs towering over the interstate.
The core advantage here is instantaneous posting in public view across the entire United States. If someone goes on the run in New York and authorities suspect they are driving west, their face can be illuminated on a massive screen in Ohio before the fugitive even crosses the state line.
The poster finally moves faster than the criminal.
Exactly. And by 2014, the data showed the FBI claimed access to over 5,200 of these digital billboards across the U.S.
5,200 billboards. But I want you, the listener, to think about your own commute this morning. You're merging onto the highway, you're driving 70 miles an hour, you're listening to music or maybe this deep dive. When you digitize these posters and put them on 5,200 highway billboards, does it actually make them more effective?
It's a valid question.
Right. Or do we just tune them out as part of our daily, visually cluttered commute? It's like they turn the entire U.S. interstate system into the town square's bulletin board. But is anyone actually looking?
Well, the data suggests they absolutely are looking, and the mechanism behind why it works is fascinating. The FBI reported that by 2014, 53 cases had been solved as a direct result of digital billboard publicity.
Wow, 53 direct cases.
Right. And that doesn't even count the many others solved through the Bureau's overall publicity efforts that included those billboards or the modern posters widely published all over the internet.
So the hit rate is actually there. But how? If I'm driving 70 miles an hour, I have maybe 2 seconds to process that image.
It comes down to sheer logistical power and a shift from pull to push mechanics.
Okay, explain that.
So the old paper way relied on pull. You had to rely on a citizen actively deciding to walk into a specific district office, stopping and pulling the information into their brain by reading the board.
Right.
The digital highway uses push mechanics. You are projecting the fugitive's face instantly and massively directly into the daily routines of millions of people. You don't need them to seek out the poster. You put the poster in a place they cannot possibly avoid seeing it.
It's a numbers game.
Exactly.
If 10 million people drive past a billboard in a major metropolitan area during rush hour, you don't need all of them to care. You just need one person who happens to recognize the face and, remembers that bounty money.
It is the ultimate hyper-accelerated evolution of that 19th century crowdsourcing. You have basically turned the entire commuting public into a passive surveillance network.
That is wild to think about. We've gone from paper on a wooden wall to pixels on a digital billboard. But what really stood out in this exploration is how the visual of the wanted poster has become so universally understood, so deeply embedded in our collective consciousness as a symbol of ultimate guilt, that it has completely transcended law enforcement entirely.
Oh, absolutely.
It's no longer just a tool for police to catch bank robbers.
Yeah.
It's become a highly effective weapon for the media.
And this is where the discussion moves from local true crime into global geopolitics.
Right.
Because the imagery of the American Wild West is so potent, media sources around the world have co-opted the poster format to cast prominent global figures as Wild West criminals. It operates as a remarkably effective form of propaganda.
We have two incredibly striking examples of this from our sources, decades apart. And I want to be clear here. We aren't endorsing any specific geopolitical viewpoints, but rather impartially reporting on how the media utilizes this visual shortcut when the stakes are global.
Right. It's about the media strategy.
Exactly. So the first example takes us back to September 4, 1939, the very beginning of World War II. The British newspaper, the Daily Mirror, published an edition that cast Adolf Hitler as a reckless criminal who was wanted dead or alive.
Think about the semiotics of that for a second. A British paper using a deeply American frontier trope to describe a European dictator.
Right. The symbol of the wanted poster is so strong it completely bypasses national borders.
It transcends cultural boundaries.
And we saw the exact same mechanism used much more recently. In 2001, the New York Post did a very similar global search cover for Osama bin Laden. What's fascinating about that instance is the timing. It happened shortly after President George W. Bush explicitly referenced the trope himself, publicly stating, and I quote, "And there's an old poster out west that I recall that said, 'Wanted, dead or alive.'"
Which practically hands the media the framing on a silver platter.
Seriously.
But if we analyze why this works so well, it's basically an act of stripping away political legitimacy.
How do you mean?
Well, using a wanted poster for a geopolitical conflict immediately simplifies a vastly complex war. Geopolitics is messy. It involves treaties, historical grievances, nuanced statecraft things that are difficult for the average citizen to fully grasp on a daily basis.
It's overwhelming.
Exactly. But a wanted poster. Everyone understands a wanted poster.
Yes. It instantly reduces a massive, complex global conflict into a clear, digestible narrative.
Right. It takes a foreign head of state or a global leader and visually reduces them to the status of a common street thug or a train robber.
Wow.
It utilizes the psychological weight of the Wild West, that primal need for justice, order, and capturing the bad guy, to bypass intellectual debate and unite the public behind a single, easily identifiable target.
It is incredible. It takes something as complicated as international relations and distills it into the exact same emotional beat as a sheriff chasing an outlaw through the desert.
Yep.
When you see that bold font, your brain immediately categorizes the person pictured as someone outside the protection of the law.
The media deeply understands this psychological shortcut, and politicians utilize it to frame conflicts in terms the public intuitively grasps.
Okay, this has been a phenomenal exploration. We set out to unpack the Wikipedia page of the wanted poster and look at the ground we've covered.
It's been quite a journey.
We started with woodblock type, tacked up in frontier post offices, learning why that rugged typography was a physical necessity for early printers. We uncovered the logistical standardization that kept the FBI printing these things in black and white all the way until 2009.
Still blows my mind.
Right. And we debunked the Hollywood dead or alive myth, realizing it was largely a tool of corporate frontier justice acting outside the government to protect their bottom line.
And then we tracked its necessary evolution onto 5,200 digital billboards across the U.S. interstate system, shifting the mechanics of the manhunt from pulling citizens in to pushing the fugitive's face out at 70 miles an hour.
And finally, we analyze how that dusty piece of paper transformed into a geopolitical tool used on global newspaper covers to strip legitimacy from dictators and terrorists by tapping into our deep-seated cultural understanding of the Wild West.
It's a lot of ground.
So the next time you, the listener, are driving down the highway and you pass an electronic billboard flashing a face, or the next time you hear a politician or a pundit invoke the phrase, "dead or alive," I want you to remember something. You are not just looking at an ad or a catchy phrase. You are witnessing a centuries-old psychological tool actively at work in the modern world.
And that actually brings up an important and perhaps slightly unsettling question about where this goes next.
Oh.
Yeah, we've seen the poster move from the stationary post office to the fast-moving digital highway and the internet. But with the rise of location tracking and instant notifications, what happens when the wanted poster is no longer something you happen to walk past or drive under, but a push notification sent directly to your phone because your GPS says you happen to be standing within a 1-mile radius of a fugitive? When the public square becomes our pockets, how will that change the nature of the hunt?
When the poster finds you instead of you finding it. That is a chilling, brilliant thought to leave on. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the source material today. Keep that image of the weathered paper on the wooden wall in your mind, because as we've learned today, the ink might fade, but the hunt never really stops. Catch you next time.